learned so much from Chris. There is no student of technology like Chris Boudreaux. Not only does he follow the latest trends, emerging technologies, he also really thinks about how these tools need to integrate into the business functions that are so important to our companies. Whether it be integrating into, sales, customer care, marketing and communications, HR, etc. And he, on his own, with some help from close colleagues, especially Constantine, silent partner, always, myself and a few others giving him input, had published a technology trend report. He continues to update it. It is available on his socialmediagovernance.com site. This space a year ago was nowhere where it is now. Like I described in the beginning, when we came last year and published the book, there were maybe a couple of providers. I think now in your report, there's over 25 that have been indexed. So not that he's going to talk about the report, I just wanted to mention it to you that it's an incredible resource. He continues to update it. And I think our sponsors here are really, really leading the way. So as we wrap up, I just want to make sure that everyone checks out our sponsors because they're very pioneering and leading the development and based on the capabilities that you all need. So Chris is going to cover some trends and different choices.
Tom Jones. Why is that funny? Y'all are mean. Okay, I have like 2 slides that I'm going to save till the very end. Of course I'm going to talk about the report. So there are actually about 32 vendors in the report now, and I was going to try and release it today, but there's just so much changing in the technologies that are in this space that I'm going to take another week or so to get it out. So I'll announce that, and there's an email sign up on the report now. It's if anybody wants to do that, I'll just email you. It's socialmediagovernance.com/research. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about trends that are happening in the space. Some of these things you guys may already be seeing and feeling, and some may not, and some you may argue with. So we'll see how that goes. So the first thing that I think is kind of the most interesting and most important is that deployments are accelerating in the space. So we talk a lot about pilots, and everybody kind of says, yeah, run a pilot, that's a good way to start. But there are actually some very big brands who are just saying, no, we're going 30,000 employees out of the gate. And that's important because it means the space is growing. I mean, who runs a social listening pilot now? Nobody does that, right? Because the space is so mature. And so I think it's a really important indicator of how the space is growing and changing, and people are seeing their competitors far ahead of them, and they're just getting into it. So, that's one of I think the important things. I think also a lot of brands are, finally accepting that their employees are out there, they're saying things, and deploying a technology or really a stack is a great way to keep the brand safe, actually, instead of just sort of pretending like it's not happening and maybe just writing a policy. If you deploy a platform, give people training, it's a lot better way to make sure that what employees are doing is consistent with both your desires and your responsibilities as an employer. Because when you talk about FTC guides on disclosures and those kinds of things, there really are a lot of things that the brand just needs to make sure they're checking on. So the next thing is around user interface innovation. So I think if you looked at the vendors in the space a year ago, the ones that were there mostly looked a lot the same. They were kind of doing the same things with maybe different colors and a different UI layout. But now there are very important differences in the capabilities of the vendors. There's a pretty diverse space. There are people who just do compliance management. There are people who have compliance management aspects. There are, Michael showed kind of 2 different types of platforms. I would expand that out to probably 5 or 6 at least different types of platforms that a large enterprise really needs to think about. What's that complete stack beyond just content, but analytics and other areas. areas. So in the user interface space, though, there are, especially now with a lot of the vendors pushing more into really having a strong mobile experience, some of the vendors now are having some really cool mechanisms or things you can do and looking at mobile apps outside of the space and bringing some of those kinds of things in. So I can't name names, but go back and ask these guys about their mobile apps and show you what they're coming out with, because they're doing some cool stuff that I think is really interesting and make your jobs a lot easier, frankly. So here we go. The third thing then was around email. So email still matters. And getting the content to employees and getting employees to share that, and even with the audiences that they have, especially if you're in certain industries, like for us, we're very much a relationship-based organization. And so a lot of communicating with the people that we care about actually still happens through email. And so being able to think about how you're going to address that and not just focus on Twitter because it's got the most robust and straightforward API can be a real big deal. And so I think in the technologies, they're more and more kind of thinking about how to help make those kinds of things happen. But it's still in the technology, I think, that a lot of you guys, how many of you are running an employee advocacy program where your content management and your analytics are all connected with your brand social media? None. Okay. Whew. So I was right. And that's kind of not too much of a problem while the space is small. But as we go back to point one, where people are jumping past pilots, right, and business value is becoming more important, and getting these programs connected to the rest of the enterprise is becoming more and more important. And so there's still a little bit of a need for doing that, and there are a few that's becoming more and more asked for, I guess, by clients. So you should talk to some vendors and they'll say, well, our clients never asked for that. Others, a few are actually starting to deploy that. So that's something that's starting to emerge. But also I think you'll see that there are some vendors in the space who are just focusing heavily on analytics because they're sort of jumping ahead, right? While a lot of people are focusing on engagement and security and compliance and maybe a mobile app and other things, they're sort of leaping ahead to fill the gap around analytics and measuring things that maybe the broader suite of platforms in the space don't, which doesn't really make your jobs any easier because now you're like, well, do we wait for these guys to build it or do we go buy another platform? And so sorting through all that out can be a little bit of a challenge. But also on the analytics side, they're starting to measure more content performance. So it's not just what are our people doing, but it's also which content is performing better and why, which I think is a hugely important thing to see coming. The next thing is optimization by teams. So the technologies are now allowing you to create different groups of different people, different segments in your organization, and optimize performance within those teams because maybe they need different content, maybe the tactics that they should utilize should be different. And then, I know I think we talked about this in the measurement piece, but when Susan and I were working together on stuff at IBM, we've found that the actions that people take that correlate strongly with increasing reach are different than the actions you should take when you're trying to increase engagement. And so different groups in your organization or maybe even different individuals might be trying to do one or the other, and you have to realize they can't do both at the same time. You have to pick, right? So being able to optimize that is something that's becoming more and more supported in the space. The next thing is around audience and employee segmentation. So looking at what's actually happening and which people are engaging with which content and then be able to derive segments out of that, which could be simple things like who are the hand raisers who are asking questions, who are the people that are sharing content, whether they're an employee and grouping in that way, or whether they're in the external audiences, and then driving out your engagement and your content according to that segmentation. And I think segmentation is one of the things that's just, it's absolutely critical to making this stuff more and more effective. Which shouldn't be new to folks who are in marketing, which were most of the hands that went up earlier, right? And then the last thing, before I get to a couple of slides, is, I know you're dying for the slides. I'm not. But is around expert enablement, which kind of plays off employee segmentation, right? So a lot of the programs in the space will initially deploy, and they sort of treat all employees as the same, and everybody gets the same kind of capabilities, and you might even give the same exact content to all of the employees on the platform. And we know that if you can, that might be great to deploy to 10,000 employees or 30,000 employees, but there's a whole other set of benefits to enabling people who have expertise in a certain area and a reputation, maybe not yet online, but maybe online, and really helping those folks to engage in their domain of expertise and giving them training and content that helps support that. And so a lot of, I think, some of the data that you guys have seen around conversion rates and those kinds of things really comes from experts a lot of times who are leveraging that reputation that they had when they shared the content about a product launch or whatever it might be. And so the extent to which the platforms are able to let you create different kinds of support and enablement for those different kinds of employees, then the more effective your program is going to be. And they're starting to do that more and more, which is good to see. So the first thing was, whenever I publish this buyer's guide, I'm really not picking on anybody. I swear. My goal is really to just try and make a contribution that helps the space advance in a positive way. And so I will typically try and point out the things that I think are important that most people aren't doing, most of the vendors aren't yet doing. And look, I've built software. It's hard. I know that. You can't do everything at once. The product roadmap is always getting bigger, and you have to prioritize. And so, at the same time, though, what I want to do is at least make everyone aware of some of the things that I think are important, where the space kind of needs to think about going next, for the good of the vendors, for the good of the clients and customers, and kind of all of us that are in the space. So, one of the things that these are three capabilities that I had in the last version of the buyer's guide, which is around compliance management, and there are 32 vendors in the guide as of now. And 11 of them do some kind of compliance management, which might mean things have to be reviewed before they get posted, or other kinds of things like that just help make sure you don't run afoul of regulations, or maybe even your own internal guides around privacy or whatever it might be. So compliance management can mean a lot of things, but 11 of the 32 are doing something there. The mobile app, and I'm still updating, that number may change, but I think it's critical to Sabrina's point earlier, right, that employees are walking around with their mobile device all the time. And if you're going to empower those folks to be ambassadors, you've got to have your capabilities on the phone or the phablet or whatever they're carrying around. And if you don't, you're just not going to get as far as you need to go. And having a native app makes a huge difference over having an HTML5 website. So I personally think that's very important, so that's why I put it in the report. There's about 11 doing that. And then the external developer API, which I think most of the industry isn't really ready for that. Most of the enterprises, most of you guys are probably not sitting around thinking, gosh, I really need a platform with an API so I can go extend their platform and build my own stuff on top of it. But as a software strategist, I know that's important to building a platform and kind of getting outside what you can do with your own resources as a software company. And so it's just something I like to see, because I think the software vendors that can build that out and leverage that and get other people building, just like Twitter had all the app developers building tons of Twitter apps, right? I think it's powerful and important. So that's why I put that in there anywhere. Should I stop for questions, because I feel like I'm talking just too slow? No? Good? Okay. Constantine will throw something at me if I go too far. It's not interesting? Can always count on you. All right. Okay, and then this one. So these are some new things that I've added to the report that'll come out in a week or so, hopefully. So the first thing is around enterprise integration, which we talked about a little bit. And so what I'm including in enterprise integration is, do you integrate with either marketing automation or Salesforce automation or CRM or HR systems, like for recruiting especially? And so far I see about 4 of the 32 that are actually doing that integration. And being able to take a tag out of a web analytics tool and then put that in and then pass that through the web analytics tool. That's not really integration. You got to be able to pull the data back and see, what I want to see is which employees are driving conversions inside of my employee advocacy platform, right? Or in the case of one vendor, which employees are driving the most people to apply for jobs at our company? And then be able to optimize those business outcomes based on that data integration and the workflow integration, right? And that's the reason why I think that's important, is because that's where we really start to see business value, and where you guys who are running programs can go, look, it's not just clicks, it's not just awareness, like we're driving business outcomes and we can prove it, right? But some of the technology has to kind of get there for you, or else it's a lot of manual effort, right? The second thing is around outcome analytics, which is closely related to the enterprise integration. So to me, outcome analytics is kind of broadly what the business really cares about. So if you go to your business leaders and you say, look, we have a whole bunch of clicks, can we have more money to expand the program? They're probably going to say, no. So it's really about leads, it's conversions, it's what are those business outcomes that could mean a lot of different things. It might mean employees applying for jobs. It could even mean employees who were hired that came through a referral that was shared through the employee advocacy platform, right? So you can think about HR or care or sales or whatever area of the business you want. That's what we're talking about. And there aren't very many vendors doing that today. And again, I'm not picking on anybody. The goal is really just to kind of say, where does the industry need to go next? And how do we kind of all get there collectively, right? The second thing is around advanced text analytics. So if you kind of take a step back and look at what you measure in a lot of these programs, there are a lot of activity metrics and around the conversations that folks are having. So your employees are having conversations, they're posting text into these platforms, and customers are replying, and they're putting text into these platforms. And how many of you are actually analyzing that text to understand the nature of those conversations today? Are you guys doing that? Don't mess with me. Right, okay, we got two halves hands. So that's kind of the next thing, is being able to perform the right kinds of text analytics on this to really understand the nature of the conversations. And it's not just sentiment, right? I mean, sentiment could be part of it, but sentiment toward exactly what and how that's changing, and how you can sort of better, create better content, better train your employees or equip them, target different audiences externally. All of that stuff can be informed by really understanding what's happening in those conversations. And that requires collaboration between the platform that you're using to publish and measure, and then some kind of text analytics capabilities there as well. And then the final one is around disclosure compliance, which is a US specific thing, particularly related to the FTC, which Jim talked about earlier. And I think it's a big deal that there are a lot of people or a lot of brands running these kinds of programs, and they think they're compliant with FTC disclosure guides, and they're just not. And part of it is, as he was saying, you have, if an employee endorses the brand or endorses a product, they have to say that they're an employee of the company. Pretty straightforward. But that disclosure has to travel with the post. So if it's a blog post, it has to, and that blog goes into an RSS feed, the bio on the blog does not travel with the post. So having employees simply say in their bio, I work at whatever, I work at EY, opinions are my own, doesn't do anything to satisfy FTC requirements. And a lot of brands think it does. And so you have to figure out, well, how do we get the disclosure to travel with a tweet? There's only 140 characters. And this stuff has already been figured out, but most people just don't know how to do it. And most of the platforms don't make it easy. So, if you're running these kinds of programs, you really have to think about how you're going to manage that. And I think there's a big opportunity for the technologies to make that easier. So that's why I put that in here. And that's really all I have around technology trends. And finishing up a little bit early so we can take some time for questions. The next thing we have is going to be Denise with some Q&A with speakers, and hopefully they're rolling the bar in here in about 10 minutes. But do you guys have any questions or comments or nothing?
I'd like to ask a question.
No. You know too much.
Yeah. No, I'm actually going to ask the question of everybody in the room. How many of you have been able to do what Chris is describing about
enterprise integration, integrating, conversion metrics, for example, into your lead development pipeline, to your sales, converting leads to sales. Anybody? It's pretty advanced. Somebody's got a half shaky. Okay. Then my next question is, how many of you are really thinking about those analytics from conversations and pairing it up into how you inform your employees to participate? So this whole notion of advanced text analytics. Anybody there yet? Okay.
Well, and part of the reason why I put these things in here is because I think the space is still very new, and the impact that we're having as a sort of all of us in the room and all of the people who are doing these kinds of programs, the impact that we're having on businesses, on our brands, our businesses, our teams, is still a thin slice of what it potentially could be. And all of these little things add up to why it's still just a thin slice. In addition to, this is the technology talk, in addition to figuring out how to get employees on board and executives on board and the whole change management of it, that's all part of it too. But until we can really definitively sign up and say, I, as the leader of the employee advocacy program, am going to sign up to drive X conversions next year, just like the email marketing people, or I'm going to drive Y number of people applying for jobs, just like the HR team has to sign up for. Until we all hold ourselves accountable for that, and we can't really yet because of a lot of these things, but until we do that, that's kind of the chicken and egg. Well, we want to make the program bigger, we want to create more value, but we can't yet. And so, we have to wrestle through these things to really get the whole space where it needs to be, across brands and industries, I think. Jim?
I wanted to make a point. I don't have a microphone, so I'll scream.
That's the preferred
Disclosure
method.
Compliance.
Yeah.
And that technology feature.
Right.
I want to remind everybody, this is a talk about technology.
Yeah,
trends.
absolutely.
And I won't name names, but the folks out there that are offering disclosure compliance technology solutions are offering only that, a technology solution.
Right.
They are not saying, here's the magic bullet, use our solution and you will comply
Right.
with all requirements for disclosure
Right.
and otherwise. It's a proprietary, typically, method for including some sorts of disclosures, but whether those are sufficient to comply with regulatory requirements, totally different ballgame and different question.
Well, I think,
So-
you definitely need to do your homework and understand what the
Right.
requirements really are. I know of at least one vendor that has great relationships with the FTC and has said, if we do this, does that count? Is that good enough? And the FTC has said yes. But
I want to talk to you about that.
Happy to.
All right,
I'll
let's
introduce you.
do that. But I wanted to, my point was simply that I didn't want people thinking that, oh, well, we got to grab one of those two guys and then
No.
we're done.
No,
We've
because
got this,
the requirements are,
compliance
you have to have
vendor.
training in place, you have to have an audit trail around the training, and on and on and on. And the requirements are really the same as affiliate marketing. So, technology is one piece of it.
Any other questions for Chris? Everybody still
All good?
awake?
All right, you're exhausted. All right.